Here's a thought to end on. The AI RMF was finalized in January 2023, roughly 6 weeks after ChatGPT launched. By any reasonable expectation, a risk framework written before the generative AI explosion should be obsolete by now. It isn't. NIST didn't rewrite it, they added profiles. And that single fact tells you the framework was built to last in a field that reinvents itself yearly. So let me ask you, how do you build guidance for a technology that changes faster than the guidance can be written? That's the puzzle this final chapter answers. Here you'll learn what AI RMF profiles actually are, how current versus target profiles drive gap analysis, and the specific profiles NIST has published, the generative AI profile, and others. Then, integration, how the framework fits with the NIST cybersecurity framework, with ISO 42001 and the EU AI Act, and with enterprise risk through ISO 31000. And finally, where this is all heading, the framework's revision, the rise of agentic AI, and how you build AI risk management that lasts. Let's bring it all together and look down the road. So, what actually is a profile? Here's the simplest way I can put it. A profile is the framework tailored to a specific situation. Think about the problem NIST faced. They wrote one framework meant to serve a tiny startup and a global bank, a hospital and a social media company, a generative chatbot, and a fraud model. Those have wildly different risks. How can one document possibly fit them all? The answer is the core framework stays general and profiles make it specific. A profile takes the framework and says, for this context, here's what matters most, here's how these functions apply, here's what good looks like here. Let me give you an analogy. Think of the framework as a general recipe for good nutrition, universal principles. A profile is that adapted for a specific person, an athlete, a diabetic, a child. Same underlying science, tailored application. So profiles can be organized around different things, around a use case like hiring or lending, around a sector like healthcare or finance, around a technology like generative AI, around a specific application. And this is the genius of it, honestly. It's how the framework stays both universal and useful. Without profiles, it would either be too generic to apply or too specific to fit everyone. Profiles resolve that tension. So when you implement the AI RMF, you're really building a profile, your version, tailored to what you do and who you affect. So here's the most practical tool in the entire framework. And if you take one actionable thing from this chapter, make it this: current profile, target profile, and the gap between them. Here's how it works. Your current profile is an honest picture of where you are right now. How do you actually manage AI risk today? Not aspirationally, actually. What's in place, what isn't. Your target profile is where you need to be. And notice, need, not want. Your target is driven by your risk context, what your systems do and who they affect. A hospital's target is more demanding than a retailer's because the stakes are higher. You set your target based on your actual risk, not on some universal ideal. And then the gap between current and target, that gap is your program. That's your roadmap. Everything you need to do is the distance between where you are and where your risk says you need to be. Do you see how clarifying this is? It turns a vast, vague framework into a concrete plan. It tells you exactly what to work on and it lets you prioritize because some gaps matter more than others. Let me give you a real example. A client did this honestly. Current profile, they had almost no monitoring of deployed models. Target profile, given they made continuous decisions, they needed continuous monitoring. The gap was obvious and specific. That became their top priority and they knew exactly why. So my advice, do this exercise early. Map current, define target, and let the gap write your roadmap. It's the fastest way to turn learning into action. So let's look at the most important profile NIST has published, the Generative AI profile, released in July 2024 as NIST AI 600-1. And its very existence proves the framework's design works. Remember the timing. The core framework came out in January 2023. Generative AI then exploded. Did NIST panic and rewrite everything? No. They added a profile. The core held and the new risks slotted into it. That's the architecture doing exactly what it was designed to do. So what's in it? It identifies risks that are unique to or amplified by generative AI. Confabulation, which is NIST's term for what people call hallucination, the model producing confident falsehoods. The ease of generating harmful content, from dangerous instructions to abusive material. Prompt injection and related attacks. The generation of convincing fakes and misinformation at scale. Intellectual property and privacy issues in what these models produce, and the environmental cost given the scale of these systems. And crucially, it doesn't just list risks, it maps them to the four functions giving concrete actions. How govern applies to generative AI, what to map, measure, manage. Now, here's why this matters for you, even if you're not building generative AI. You're almost certainly using it. It's in the tools you buy, the features vendors switch on. So, this profile is relevant to nearly everyone now. So, if generative AI touches your organization, and it does, this profile is where the specific guidance lives. Read it alongside the core. So the generative AI profile was the first, but the profile ecosystem keeps growing, and that growth is itself the point. Let me give you the shape of what's emerging, understanding that this area is actively developing, so you should check NIST's Resource Center for the current state. Two directions worth knowing about. First, the intersection of AI and cybersecurity. This cuts both ways, and it's worth holding both directions in your head. AI as a tool for defenders and the risks that come with relying on it, and AI as a weapon for attackers, and how AI systems themselves become targets. That two-way relationship, AI defending and AI being attacked, is one of the most active areas in the field right now. Second, critical infrastructure. When AI enters systems that societies genuinely depend on, power, water, transport, healthcare delivery, the stakes change qualitatively. A failure isn't an inconvenience, it's potentially a matter of public safety. So profiles aimed at these high-stakes sectors carry a different weight, and the rigor expected is correspondingly higher. Here's the pattern I want you to notice across all of this. As AI spreads into new domains, NIST doesn't rebuild the framework each time. They add a profile that speaks to that domain's specific risks while the core stays put. So the practical takeaway, whatever your sector, keep an eye out for a profile that fits it. And if none exists yet, you now know how to build your own using the current versus target method we just covered. So let's talk integration, because you almost certainly aren't starting from nothing, and I don't want you building a parallel universe next to what you already have. The NIST cybersecurity framework is the obvious partner, and NIST deliberately designed these to fit together. They share the same DNA: voluntary, outcome-based, function-structured. If you know one, the other feels familiar immediately. So where do they overlap, and where does AI add something new? The overlap is real and large. Your AI system is a system. It needs the things the cybersecurity framework already covers: access control, monitoring, incident response, supply chain security. All of that applies to your AI, unchanged. Don't reinvent it. But the AI RMF adds what cybersecurity doesn't touch. Your firewall doesn't care whether the model is biased. Your intrusion detection says nothing about whether decisions are explainable or whether the training data was fair or whether the model is drifting. Those are AI specific, and that's the layer the AI RMF adds on top. So here's the practical advice, and it's the same principle I gave you back in Chapter 2. Don't build a separate AI governance tower next to your security function. Extend what you have. Your cybersecurity work is a foundation to build on, not a competitor to work around. I've seen organizations create entirely parallel structures, duplicating effort, confusing everyone about who owns what. Wasteful. The smart move is integration. Add the AI-specific layer onto your existing mature security foundation. You'll move faster and confuse fewer people. So here's a problem you'll hit fast if you operate seriously. It's not just NINT. There's ISO 42001. There's the EU AI Act. There are other regimes arriving. Are you really going to run a separate compliance program for each? That way lies madness and a very large team. The answer is Crosswalks, and it's genuinely good news. These frameworks overlap enormously because they're all trying to address the same underlying reality. So work you do for one counts substantially toward the others. Let me connect the three you'll meet most. NIST AI RMF is your thinking framework, voluntary, flexible about how to reason. ISO 42001 is a certifiable management system standard, the one that gives you an auditable certificate you can show a customer. And the EU AI Act is law, binding, with real penalties for anyone touching the EU market. Now here's the key insight. They ask for the same core things in different languages. Know your systems, assess your risks, govern them, document your reasoning, keep humans meaningfully involved, monitor after deployment. That common core is most of the work. So a crosswalk maps how doing the AI RMF gets you most of the way to ISO 42001 certification and covers much of what the EU AI Act demands for high-risk systems. You do the substance once and present it three ways. Here's my honest practical advice. Build to a solid framework first. The AI RMF is an excellent choice, and you'll find you've done the bulk of the work for the others. Chase each regulation separately, one at a time, and you'll never stop running, and you'll duplicate constantly. So here's a mistake I want to steer you away from firmly. Treating AI risk as a special, separate thing, quarantined off in its own corner, run by its own team, speaking its own language, disconnected from how your organization manages every other risk. Because AI risk isn't a wholly new species. It's a new source of risk that flows into the same enterprise risk management you already have. And you do already have one. Financial risk, operational risk, strategic risk, all of that runs through some enterprise framework, very often ISO 31000 or something shaped like it. So AI risk should connect into that, not float beside it. ISO 31000 gives you the general architecture, the principles and process for managing any risk. The AI RMF gives you the AI-specific depth that general framework lacks. They're complementary. ISO 31000 is the general theory. The AI RMF is the specialist knowledge for this particular domain. Why does this integration matter so much practically? Two reasons. First, your board and executives already think in enterprise risk terms. If AI risk arrives in a completely alien vocabulary, disconnected from everything else on their risk register, it gets sidelined as too technical. Connect it to the language they use, and it gets the attention it deserves. Second, risks interact. An AI risk can become a financial risk, a legal risk, a reputational risk. If AI is siloed, you miss those connections. So the principle, AI risk is enterprise risk with specialist depth. Wire it into your existing risk function. Don't build an island. So let's look ahead, because this framework is not standing still, and the frontier is moving towards something genuinely new. Agentic AI. First, the revision. Remember, this is version 1.0, and NIST always intended it to be a living document. There's ongoing work to keep it current, and I'd urge you to check NIST's AI Resource Center for the latest, because things move. But the substantive shift I want you to understand is agentic AI, because it changes some of what we've discussed. Everything we've covered has largely assumed AI that advises. It produces a prediction, a recommendation, a score, and a human decides what to do with it. The human is the point of action. Agentic AI removes that gap. These are systems that don't just recommend, they act. They call other systems, execute transactions, send communications, chain multiple steps together to pursue a goal, with far less human intervention at each step. Think about what that does to risk. We talked about human oversight as a key control. But when the agent acts in seconds across many steps, where does the human fit? By the time you review, it's already done. The oversight model we've relied on strains badly, and the harms can compound. An agent making a chain of decisions can amplify a single early error through everything that follows. So, this is the live frontier, and profiles and guidance are actively developing here. My advice: watch this space closely. If you're deploying agentic systems, the fundamentals still apply, but human oversight and containment need rethinking hard. So we're near the end, and I want to pull back to the biggest question. How do you build AI risk management that actually lasts in a field that reinvents itself every year? Because that's the real challenge, isn't it? Not learning today's risks, but building something that survives tomorrow's. Here's my honest answer from watching what endures and what collapses. First, invest in the durable core, not just the current details. The specific risks change, the four functions, the characteristics, the socio-technical thinking don't. If your program is built on genuine understanding of how to think about AI risk, it adapts. If it's built on a checklist of this year's known issues, it's obsolete next year. Second, build capability, not just process. A great process run by people who don't understand it degrades fast. People who deeply understand the principles will handle risks the process never anticipated. Third, embed it, don't bolt it on. Risk management that lives in a separate team, consulted occasionally, fails. Risk management woven into how AI actually gets built and deployed endures, because it's part of the work, not a gate on top of it. Fourth, and we've said this throughout, make it continuous. AI risk is a condition you maintain, not a milestone you pass. The monitoring, the reassessment, the culture, those are forever activities. And fifth, the cultural one. Build an organization where raising a concern is rewarded. Because in the end, your best risk control isn't a tool or a document. It's a person who notices something's wrong and feels safe saying so. That's what lasts. So let's gather up this final chapter and the whole journey with it. First, profiles are how the framework adapts. The core stays general, profiles make it specific to your context. When you implement the AI RMF, you're building your own profile. Second, and most practically, current profile, target profile, gap. That gap is your roadmap. Do this exercise early, and it turns a vast framework into a concrete plan. Third, the generative AI profile proves the design works. New risks slotted into the stable core without a rewrite. And it's relevant to you because you're almost certainly using generative AI already. Fourth, integrate, don't duplicate. Extend your cybersecurity framework work, crosswalk to ISO 42001 and the EU AI Act, and wire AI risk into your enterprise risk function. Do the substance once, present it many ways. Fifth, agentic AI is the frontier, and it strains the human oversight model we've relied on. Watch it closely. And sixth, sustainability comes from the durable core, real capability, embedding, continuity, and above all, a culture where people feel safe raising concerns. That brings us to the end of this playlist. If you want a detailed, structured course on everything we've covered, with role plays, quizzes, and practice tests, our Udemy course link is in the description. Do subscribe to the channel if this series helped you. It genuinely makes a difference. And the full playlist link is in the description, which gives you the complete, ordered list of every video in this series, start to finish. Thank you for going through this journey. Now go and build AI risk management that actually protects people. See you in the next one.